Hello everybody, welcome to episode 65 of Show For You, where today we'll be going over The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Now, I'll try to go over the cover briefly, but yeah, pretty basic cover, the vintage cover of Cormac McCarthy. All of my Cormac McCarthy books are on the vintage cover. That's honestly one thing I take pride in with my Cormac McCarthy collection, because I have all 12 of his novels in the vintage covers. But the vintage covers are really nice. This is the only one that's kind of bland, but I mean, it's quite fitting for the story that is told here, so yeah. But I just kind of get into the story briefly because it is kind of a very simple. It's not a very simple story, but it is a very not really high stakes. Like not many really important events happen, but it is a very good book. Like it's hard to explain. So I just kind of go over it. But we're introduced to a man and his son who are surviving in this post-apocalyptic world. Now, in this apocalypse world, we do not actually have zombies or any beasts in the apocalypse. It is just people and desolation. That's all there is. Now, it's never exactly explained what caused this world to come to be as it is, but we see that a lot of stuff is burned down and all that, so we can presume like possible warfare and stuff like that, or bombings. But yeah, like everything is burned down. Like almost all the houses, all of the trees, like everything is covered in ash. Like they have to wear masks to keep the ash out of their lungs. But yeah, so we start off the book and we kind of see as the father and the son are just kind of traveling around doing their thing. They ultimately run up on this house, and we see it as the first mini encounters where the boy is scared of going in a house. Now, I really love this theme, actually, because the boy is scared. I mean, it's not ever specifically explained, but the boy is scared because people live in houses, and people are the real monsters in this book. There's no need for zombies because people are the ones who are the monsters, which I really enjoyed as a concept, because, I mean, the zombie stuff, it's been done time and time again, and yes, there's new spins on the zombie take, apocalypse, and all that stuff, and they're each good. I mean, The Walking Dead is one of my favorite shows of all time. I really enjoy the movie 28 Days Later. It's probably one of my favorite, whatchamacallit, Cillian Murphy movies. But yeah, so this is the world they live in, and they pull up in the house, they kind of do some scavenging and stuff like that. They pass through like a mechanic shop at one point, collect some tools, repair their cart. They have a little buggy that they push around, but no, that's not what they're called. I was thinking about the English version, but yeah. So we see this, and then we kind of progress along a little bit, and ultimately they actually end up encountering a human on the road. Now, it's called The Road because they're traveling along the road, like the entire book almost, and they're traveling on the road and they see a person, and we see how they take these people. People are the monsters, like I said in this book. So they go around this man, they're very cautious of him, they're watching him, they stay out of his sight, ultimately they pass him by. And it's so cool to see, like, a world where people are not, like, communicable organisms, and instead they are terrified of each other at threat of death, and reasonably so, because we see later on in this book some crazy stuff going on with the people. But yeah, then it's kind of around during this time when we see as we get some backstory on the boy, the dad, and his mother. And so we actually see the mother a little bit, and we learn that she was pregnant at the beginning of I believe it was around the beginning of the actual apocalyptic stuff. And this boy is really young. Like I would bet he's under 10 years old, but because he calls his dad Papa and all that stuff. So yeah, I would presume he's under 10 years old. But yeah, we see as the mom is very doomorist when it comes to the apocalypse. She does end up giving birth to the boy, and as time progresses, ultimately she becomes, I guess, nihilistic and gives up on the world, and ultimately she leaves the boy and the father and goes and kills herself. But yeah, so we move along, and we are back in the main timeline, and we see as the dad and the son, I believe they run up on a semi-truck, and at this semi-truck they see a bunch of people gathered around, and they ultimately try to dodge them, but they run into a person who was behind the truck, and during this encounter we see as the man that was back there snatches the boy and takes him kind of like hostage. And one of the main things that the dad actually has is a revolver. The revolver has 2 shots in it at the beginning of the book. It originally had 3, but the mom killed herself with one of them, and so we have 2 left. And so we see as we're in the standoff where the boy is captured by the man, and we see as the dad shoots this guy, gets the boy back, and they end up just heading off. And this obviously messes with the boy a lot. They actually end up running back and passing by and seeing how they buried the dude and all that stuff. I don't think they actually buried him. I know they mentioned like viscera and stuff laying around, so he might have gotten eaten, or we don't know. But yeah, then they ultimately just kind of travel on a little bit more, and they end up in a mansion. Now, this mansion is, the boy is obviously scared because he's scared after the attack and all that, and he doesn't want to go in here. But they ultimately end up going in, and they end up finding people there. Like, these people have been presumably eaten or badly burned, because like they're scarred and they're amputated and all that stuff. So it's possible that they've been being munched on by some other humans. But yeah. So after that, we progress some more, and the next big thing that happens is the boy and his dad run up on a bunker, and actually exploring around this house. Ultimately, they end up finding the bunker. Now, this little bunker is a treasure trove for them because they had been starving. That's one of the consistent themes throughout this book, is they're like almost always starving, and they occasionally run up on food supplies and all that good stuff, which is good for them. But this bunker was one of the best things that happened to them food-wise. So they run up on the bunker, and they live there for a couple days. They're playing checkers. The boy gets to bathe. They get to try some phenomenal food. The boy, some of them for the first time, like, I don't know if, I know they mentioned coffee was one of the things that he enjoyed eating there, and biscuits with butter and all that stuff. And it was just really nice to see them get this little brief reprieve. But Dad mentions in his mind, okay, we get to see his thoughts, and he mentions how he kind of wished that little bunker stint would have never happened, because that forces the boy to go back into a world that is so harsh and cruel after having this brief like moment of reprieve. But then after that, they move along, and they're traveling on the road one day, and they run into this old man. Now, this old man's emaciated, and they're like kind of staying away from him and all that stuff, but he's emaciated, and he's just walking along, and the boy ends up convincing the dad to give him some food and go and talk with him. So they end up going and talk with him, and they take him to the dad actually has to carry him to the fire, and he mentions how this old man weighs under 100 pounds most likely. So they carry him to the fire, they eat with him, all this stuff, and we see as he lies to them, he tells them that his name is or Eli, because Ley, I'm just say Eli. But yeah, we see he lies to him, and they kind of have a brief discussion. It's not very productive at all, but we can see his dad's kind of getting fed up with him, so ultimately they end up leaving him behind, and he goes on his own way. I believe they give him like some clothes and stuff like that. So all this stuff was tattered, and it was mentioned how he stunk even for this post-apocalyptic world. But so we kind of see it progress along a little bit more, and we see as they pass by another large group of people, which they stay out of the way of. But during this, they ultimately end up passing by one of their previous camps, and they see a very gruesome scene. They see a baby who has been gutted being put on a spit and cooked, which is very dark to say the least. And it messes with the boy a lot. Like the boy, because the dad often tries to shield the boy from seeing images of death and stuff like that, and this was bad for him. But after this, they ultimately end up getting a little bit of a reprieve, and the boy ends up getting to enjoy something since they end up on the coast. Throughout this entire thing, their main goal has been to get to the coast, and there's not specifically mentioned why their goal was to get to the coast, but they ultimately do end up getting to the coast. And the boy gets to enjoy the salt water and the sea and all of that, and they just kind of travel up along and are eating well off the supplies that they got from the bunker. And as we progress along, and ultimately they end up running up on a ship, and they find a ship out in the bay. And so what they do is he leaves the boy behind to watch over the supplies and all that, and he gives him the gun, and the dad ends up going on the ship, and he finds quite a bit of food, some new clothes, a flare gun, and the first aid kit and all that stuff. So he ends up coming back, and him and the boy end up traveling down the line for a little bit. But once they get like almost, I believe it was about a day's travel down, that the boy left the pistol. So they have to go back and get the pistol. And ultimately they end up getting back to their cart, they're eating well and all that stuff, and we see as another day, the dad ends up going and re-scavenging for more stuff. That's when he finds the first aid kit and the flare gun, which the boy is very intrigued by because he doesn't know what a flare gun is. But we see they camp out on the beach for a little bit more, and then we see as the dad ultimately ends up shooting the flare gun for the boy because the boy wanted to see what a flare gun was like. And now, it's not directly stated if this is what caused it, but it is presumed that this is what caused it. But one day, while they are off scavenging around, they come back and everything has been stolen. They have not been left a single morsel for anything, and this obviously crushed them. They start freaking out, and the dad's like, we gotta search them down. So they ultimately end up going to the road, tracking the person to the road, and they get to looking around for like remnants of sand, because the cart they had obviously would have left sand behind, and the boy ends up finding it. So they track this dude down. They see a dude with a butcher knife who has taken all their supplies. So the dad pulls a gun on him, and he's like, yo, get back and give me my stuff. He gets him to give all this stuff, but then he's like, you gotta strip down, you gotta put all your stuff in here. You were gonna leave us to die, so I'm gonna leave you to die. Now this obviously gets with the boy. The boy is very saddened by this because he believes they've been the good guys throughout all this thing. Because what the dad has been telling him through all this is that they are carrying on the flame and that they are the good guys and that the people who are eating people are the bad guys. And this really messes with the boy because now he no longer sees his dad completely as the good guy and he sees him as kind of a gray area. So this messes with the boy a lot. And due to this, the dad and boy end up going out camping, and the boy ultimately convinces the dad to go back and leave this man some clothes in the middle of the road so he doesn't ultimately end up dying. But, yeah, after that, they end up staying on the beach for a little bit longer, and, wait, hold up. No, okay, I forgot to mention this then. But, the dad briefly gets sick during a time on the beach, but he ultimately ends up recovering. And the boy also gets sick. Now, while the boy's sick, the dad is freaking out. He's trying to make sure he is healthy as possible because he does not. His last thing is he does not need the boy to die because the boy cannot die because he cannot deal with hell holding his dead son in his arms. And he mentions later on in the book. But yeah. So the kid ultimately is healed. Everything's fine. They end up going along, and the dad's sickness is still there because throughout all this he's been coughing up blood, and this is. It's not specifically stated why, but I believe this is due to the fact that he's inhaled so much ash, so it's probably damaged his lungs, and they're slowly deteriorating. And we see as it gets worse and worse as the book progresses. But, yeah, after they have this run-in with the dude who robbed them, they end up going further along. They end up traveling to, like, this port area. And while at the port area, they are walking along, they actually get shot by someone with an arrow, but the dad ends up turning on him and shooting him with a flare gun and killing this dude, which would have been a pretty cool kill. But, yeah. So ultimately the dad ends up running in, leaving the boy to get cover, even though he did get hit with an arrow and was wounded, not badly though. He ends up going in, looking for the person. He doesn't end up finding him, but him and the boy end up regrouping, and he gets the boy to give him the first aid kit. He sutures up his leg and all that good stuff, and they progress along once more. Now they get to going, and eventually the dad starts to break down, like physically break down. He starts to get worse, his health starts to decrease, and ultimately we see as he's about unable to progress along. So the boy is left to scavenge about and all that stuff. But as he goes scavenging about, the dad is slowly dying of his cough, which is slowly coughing up his lungs. But we see as the boy goes and scavenges, and ultimately the dad ends up dying, and that's when he tells his son that he couldn't see him die in his arms. But yeah, so after this, they go along, and the dad ultimately ends up dying, like I said. And the boy, a couple days, I believe it's almost like a day later, walks out in the road to look around, and he sees this guy with a bandolier and a shotgun. And he ends up pulling up, and the guy, he's holding the gun out, and the boy is, and he's like, don't move. And ultimately, they end up talking. He reveals that he is one of the good guys, and he helped him kind of give his dad, like, funeral rites and all that stuff. And he actually is a good guy, and he doesn't end up trying to take his pistol or anything. And they move along, and ultimately he ends up taking him to a refuge where there's other people and kids his age, and one of the kids who's mentioned is a little boy who's about his age. And earlier on in the book, they had seen a little boy who was about the boy's age, or the kid's age, and the dad was like, no, we can't go back for him. This really broke down the boy too. This is one of the things that made him feel less faith in his dad and being a good guy. But they ultimately end up going there, and the boy finds a community and does not end up dying. So that is kind of where the book ends. Now, like I said, I love this book because it focused on like the realism of an apocalypse. It really reminded me of DayZ, which is a video game, if you didn't know. And it's a survival apocalypse game. And yes, there's zombies in that game, but they are not the main focus. The big thing you gotta worry about is people and starving or thirsting to death. Because the people, if you run into someone on DayZ, if you know, don't trust them, they'll kill you. But then you also have to worry about a lot of food, and especially on normal servers, you can't find food or water barely anywhere, so you really have to conserve. And you gotta go out of your way from your main mission to find food and water a lot of times. But I really like it because of how realistic it was, because in an actual apocalypse, if there's not zombies, people are the biggest monsters you can run into. Because once society breaks down, people become animals. And without the constructs of society, we are nothing better than animals. So we see as the actual monsters in this book, like I said, are people. And I really like the fact that they were always looking for food, because that brought a lot of a sense of realism to it, because they did almost starve to death multiple times. But I also liked like the mental nature of this, because we would see the people go from different degrees. Like they go from having high highs to going to like low lows, because there's at one point where they're doing pretty well for themselves, and they run into some people, and I believe it's actually at the mansion, and the boy and the dad, the group of people comes back while they're at the mansion, and the dad gives the boy a gun, and he's like, if they come near, shoot yourself. And that got to me, really, because though the dad wants what's best for the kid, he knows what's best for the kid is dying in that moment and telling the kid to kill himself, which, because, I mean, by then the dad would be dead if the people end up getting to the boy, so he just tells the boy to kill himself so he can't be essayed or killed or eaten. And I just thought that was a dark thing. Like, that really stuck with me, is him telling the kid to kill himself. But it was a father's intuition, because that was the best thing for the kid at that moment if it actually ended up going that way. But yeah, like, I loved how simplistic this book was and how it didn't really have any super high highs, but it told a phenomenal story. Cormac McCarthy always does so good with taking a relatively simplistic premise and telling a masterpiece with it. Now, this book was actually the one, as you can see there, that won him the Pulitzer Prize. Now, is this worthy of a Pulitzer Prize? I don't know. I would say that it was a very phenomenal book, but I don't know if it's worthy of a Pulitzer Prize, because it was very simplistic, and I would honestly think Blood Meridian or No Country for Old Men, or even, like, Child of God deserved a Pulitzer Prize. Well, no, I did not like this. I like this more than Child of God. So I'd say Blood Meridian or No Country for Old Men were honestly more deserving of one, but this book absolutely does take the apocalypse route into one that's not often seen in media, and it's actually the first time I've really seen it done very well in fiction. But yeah, so I just really enjoyed this book, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who is interested in apocalyptic world or just got a new spin on an old genre. And I really think that's all I have to say about The Road. Like I said, I mentioned over the kid and all that, and just kind of the breakdown of society in a way. I also kind of like how it was left to be ambiguous about how the world went to nothing, and they didn't focus too much on the past, because what was going on at hand was the pertinent stuff: the starvation, the people, the fear of being eaten by other humans. So yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed this book, and I would highly recommend it. But that's all I really have to say about The Road, and all I really have for episode 65 of Shelf Review. So thank you very much for watching.